Have you ever wondered what would happen if the tables were turned between the powerful and the powerless? This true story of dignity, humility, and redemption might just change how you see workplace relationships forever. By the end, you'll understand why sharing this message matters more than you think. Marcus Johnson parked his battered 1998 Toyota Corolla at the far end of the executive lot, hoping the distance would make its peeling paint and mismatched door less noticeable among the gleaming luxury vehicles. It was a small deception he maintained, parking in the executive lot despite being a mid-level accountant at Westfield Financial. But today, that tiny rebellion felt especially necessary. It was a performance review with CEO Richard Westfield, and Marcus needed every ounce of confidence he could muster. The accounting department hummed with nervous energy. Rumors of downsizing had circulated for weeks, though the company's quarterly reports showed record profits. Marcus straightened his tie, thrift store Calvin Klein, but no one needed to know that, and gathered his portfolio of achievements. 5 years at Westfield Financial had taught him to be prepared for Richard's interrogations. "He's ready for you," announced Richard's assistant, her expression carefully neutral. Richard Westfield's corner office embodied power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown, minimalist furniture that cost more than Marcus's annual salary, and a desk so immaculately clean it seemed untouched by human hands. "Marcus, have a seat." Richard didn't look up from his computer screen, his fingers tapping impatiently on his custom keyboard. At 55, Richard maintained the physique of someone who could afford personal trainers and nutritionists, his silver hair perfectly coiffed in what magazines called power gray. "Thank you for making time, sir," Marcus began, opening his portfolio. "I prepared a summary of my contributions this quarter. The Davis account alone brought in—" "Let's cut to the chase," Richard interrupted, finally looking up. His eyes flickered briefly to Marcus's scuffed shoes before returning to his face. "Your performance isn't the issue." Relief flooded Marcus momentarily. "That's good to hear. I've been working on that new investment strategy." "The issue," Richard continued as if Marcus hadn't spoken, "is fit. Company culture. Image." Each word landed like a stone. "Westfield Financial has a certain standard to maintain. Our clients expect excellence in all aspects." Marcus's mouth went dry. "I don't understand." Richard sighed, leaning back in his ergonomic chair. "Your car, Marcus. Parking it in the executive lot. Did you think no one would notice?" The blood drained from Marcus's face. "My car? I apologize for parking there, but it's not about where you park. It's what you park. That vehicle is an embarrassment. And your suits, clearly off the rack. The frayed cuffs, the discount ties." Richard gestured vaguely toward Marcus's appearance. "Clients notice these things. It creates an impression of financial distress. Sir, I have 2 children in college and medical bills for my wife's treatment last year," Marcus explained, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "But my work has always been excellent." The Davis account. "Exactly my point," Richard cut in. "Your personal financial situation is clearly strained. How can our clients trust someone who can't manage their own finances to handle theirs?" The absurdity of the statement momentarily stunned Marcus into silence. His mortgage was paid on time. His children's tuition was covered. Yes, his wife's cancer treatment had depleted their savings, but they were surviving responsibly. "With all due respect, sir, my personal finances have never affected my work performance. My portfolio management strategies have increased client returns by 17% this year alone." Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Numbers aren't everything, Marcus. Perception matters. Westfield Financial caters to high-net-worth individuals. They need to see success reflected in everyone they encounter here." He slid a folder across the desk. "HR has prepared a generous severance package. 2 months' salary. Letter of recommendation. Standard NDA." Marcus stared at the folder, disbelief warring with rising anger. "You're firing me because I'm not rich enough to work here?" Richard's expression hardened. "I'm terminating your employment because you no longer project the image our firm requires. It's just business. Just business." The phrase echoed in Marcus's mind as his 15 years of accounting experience, his dedicated service, His consistent performance were reduced to the appearance of his car and the quality of his suit. What about my team? The Anderson portfolio is in the middle of restructuring. Marcus's thoughts raced to the projects he'd leave unfinished, the colleagues who depended on his expertise. Nathan will take over your accounts. He drives a BMW, makes a much better impression during client meetings. Richard checked his watch. HR is waiting to process your paperwork. Security will escort you to clear out your desk. The indignity of being watched while packing his belongings. Family photos, the excellence awards, the thank you notes from satisfied clients. Burned as deeply as the dismissal itself. Colleagues averted their eyes as a security guard hovered nearby, his presence announcing Marcus's new status. Outsider failure, cautionary tale. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, severance papers spread before him, trying to find words to tell his family. His daughter Amy was due home from college next week. His son Thomas had just started a prestigious internship, bolstered by his father's connections. His wife Lisa, finally in remission, had been talking about a celebration dinner for Marcus's expected promotion. How was work? Lisa asked, setting a cup of coffee before him, her smile still bearing the ghost of her year-long battle with illness. Marcus covered her hand with his. I need to tell you something. That night, sleep eluded him. The mortgage had 3 years left. Amy's tuition payment was due next month. Thomas needed textbooks for summer courses. Lisa's medication, even with insurance, cost hundreds monthly. The severance would cover perhaps 2 months if they were frugal. The job market for 50-year-old accountants was not promising. Morning brought no clarity, but necessity demanded action. By noon, Marcus had updated his resume. By evening, he'd applied to 17 positions. By week's end, 63 applications had yielded 3 form letter rejections and deafening silence from the rest. The unemployment office was a lesson in humility. Marcus, who had spent decades in plush offices making financial decisions for millionaires, now sat on a plastic chair clutching paperwork that would determine whether his family could eat and keep their modest home. Johnson? Marcus Johnson? The caseworker called, not looking up from her computer. As Marcus rose to approach her desk, he caught sight of himself in the reflection of the office window. Shoulders slumped, eyes hollow, the weight of rejection visible in his posture. For the first time, he understood how Richard Westfield saw him. Diminished, desperate, defeated. But in that moment of recognition came another, more powerful realization. His worth wasn't measured by Richard Westfield's perception. His dignity wasn't determined by the car he drove or the suit he wore. His value as a professional, as a human being, transcended his economic circumstances. The caseworker looked up as Marcus straightened his shoulders and extended his hand. Marcus Johnson, he said, his voice finding its strength again. Thank you for seeing me today. Little did Marcus know that this moment of reclaimed dignity would be the first step toward an encounter that would transform not only his life, but the life of the man who had dismissed him as too poor to belong. The days following Marcus's dismissal blurred together in a haze of anxiety and determination. Each morning began with the same ritual: coffee, job search websites, follow-up emails that went unanswered, and the growing knot in his stomach as their savings dwindled. Lisa had taken the news with characteristic grace. We've weathered worse, she reminded him, squeezing his hand across the dinner table. When I was diagnosed, you told me we'd fight together. Now it's my turn to tell you the same. Their children's responses have been different, but equally supportive. Amy offered to take a semester off to work, an offer Marcus firmly declined. Thomas suggested using his internship connections, which Marcus accepted with both gratitude and the quiet shame of a father needing his son's help to find work. 3 weeks into unemployment, Marcus sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills. The mortgage payment loomed 5 days away. Lisa's prescription refill couldn't wait. The electricity notice bore an ominous red stamp. His unemployment benefits had been delayed due to processing issues. The severance was nearly gone. Any news today? Lisa asked, setting a sandwich beside him. Peanut butter, no jelly, one of many small economies they'd implemented. 2 rejections, Marcus replied, trying to keep the defeat from his voice. Both said I was overqualified. Lisa sat beside him, her eyes still bright despite everything they'd endured, meeting his. Overqualified is just code for too expensive or too old. Or both, Marcus added with a weak smile. Have you considered... Lisa hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Maybe looking beyond accounting for now, just temporarily? The suggestion stung, but Marcus knew she was right. Pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. I'll expand my search tomorrow. That night, scrolling through job listings far below his qualifications, Marcus came across a position that made him pause. Maintenance supervisor, Westview Properties. The commercial building management company was seeking someone to oversee janitorial and basic maintenance services for a downtown high-rise. The salary was less than half what he'd earned at Westfield Financial, but it was something. More surprising was the listed owner of Westview Properties. R. Westfield Investments. Richard's side business. Marcus's finger hovered over the apply button as conflicting emotions surged through him. Working for the man who had humiliated him, even indirectly, felt like swallowing broken glass. Yet the irony was undeniable. Richard had deemed him too poor to work as an accountant, but might unwittingly hire him to clean floors. With a deep breath, Marcus submitted his application, carefully editing his resume to emphasize his organizational skills and downplaying his financial expertise. Under previous employment, he listed financial services professional rather than senior accountant, hoping it would be vague enough to avoid immediate recognition. To his surprise, the call came the next day. Mr. Johnson, this is Sandra from Westview Properties. We'd like you to come in for an interview tomorrow. The interview was conducted not by Richard, but by a harried property manager named Ted, who seemed delighted to find someone so organized and articulate applying for the position. Frankly, Mr. Johnson, you're overqualified, but if you're willing to accept the salary we're offering, I'd be crazy to turn you down, Ted said, extending his hand. When can you start? Immediately, Marcus replied, relief washing over him. That evening, telling Lisa about the job, offer brought mixed emotions. The salary would keep them afloat, barely, but the step down in prestige was undeniable. It's honest work, Lisa said firmly, and temporary, just until something better comes along. Marcus nodded, trying to believe it. The ironic thing is, Richard Westfield owns the building. He'll technically be my employer again. Lisa's eyes widened before a slow smile spread across her face. Well, isn't that something? He'll probably never even know I'm there, Marcus added quickly. He has managers for his managers. But fate had other plans. Marcus's first week as maintenance supervisor was a crash course in invisible labor that kept prestigious buildings functioning. He learned about HVAC systems, security protocols, the chemistry of industrial cleaning solutions, and the surprisingly complex politics of the janitorial staff. He also discovered something unexpected. Respect. The maintenance team, predominantly immigrants and people without college degrees, valued his clear communication and the dignity with which he treated them. When Marcus helped Jorge fix a broken toilet, rather than simply ordering him to do it, he earned instant credibility. Last boss never got his hands dirty, Jorge commented, passing Marcus a wrench. You different. 2 weeks into the job, Marcus was reviewing the maintenance schedule when Ted burst into his small basement office. Johnson, need you upstairs now. Pipe burst on the executive floor. Water everywhere. Marcus grabbed his toolkit and followed Ted to the elevator. As they ascended to the top floor, Ted explained nervously. The big boss is here today. Quarterly inspection. He's furious about the water damage near the conference room. The elevator doors opened to reveal controlled chaos. Water seeped across expensive carpet, and anxious executives hovered at the edges of the damage. And there, standing in the center of it all, barking orders into a phone, was Richard Westfield. Marcus froze momentarily before professionalism took over. He assessed the situation, directed the janitors to strategic positions with wet vacuums, and knelt to examine the source of the leak. The valve is shot, he explained to Ted. We need to shut off the water to this section and replace it immediately. Then do it. Richard's voice boomed from behind them. This is embarrassing. We have clients arriving in. His voice halted abruptly as Marcus turned around. Recognition dawned slowly on Richard's face, followed by disbelief and then something unreadable. Johnson? Marcus nodded curtly. Mr. Westfield. For a moment, the two men stared at each other, one in an impeccable suit now splashed with water, the other in maintenance coveralls holding a pipe wrench. You work here? Richard finally asked, his voice lower. Yes, sir. Maintenance supervisor. If you'll excuse me, I need to shut off the water main before the damage spreads. Marcus turned away, not waiting for a response. For the next hour, Marcus directed the cleanup operation with quiet efficiency, keeping his back to Richard whenever possible. When the crisis was finally contained, he gathered his tools and prepared to return to his basement office. Johnson. Richard's voice stopped him by the elevator. A word in my office. Marcus followed Richard into the corner suite, achingly similar to the one where he'd been fired a month earlier. He stood straight, pipe wrench still in hand, water staining his coveralls. Richard closed the door and turned to face him. You didn't mention your previous position when you applied. I didn't think it was relevant to maintaining toilets and changing light bulbs, Marcus replied evenly. And yet you're overseeing a team, managing schedules, coordinating emergency responses. Richard gestured toward the now contained flood. Skills from your previous life. Marcus remained silent. Richard paced behind his desk, clearly unsettled. Why here? Of all places. The job was available. My family needs to eat. Marcus kept his tone neutral, despite the anger simmering beneath. Bills don't care about pride. Something flickered across Richard's face. Discomfort. Perhaps even shame. He adjusted his gold cufflinks, a nervous habit Marcus remembered from their previous encounters. Your work today was efficient, Richard said finally. The damage could have been much worse. Thank you, sir. If there's nothing else, I should check on the dehumidifiers. As Marcus turned to leave, Richard spoke again. Your wife was a cancer? I remember something in your personnel file. The personal question caught Marcus off guard. Yes, she's in remission now. Richard nodded slowly. Good. That's good to hear. The interaction left Marcus unsettled as he rode the elevator back to his basement office. He had expected triumph or at least satisfaction in Richard seeing his former executive reduced to maintenance work. Instead, he felt oddly hollow. That evening, Marcus recounted the encounter to Lisa, who listened with uncharacteristic intensity. So, what happens now? She asked when he finished. Marcus shrugged. Nothing, probably. He doesn't exactly visit the building regularly. Today was just bad luck. But Marcus was wrong. The next morning, Ted informed him that Richard Westfield would be inspecting all building operations, including maintenance, personally over the coming days. Never seen him so interested in the nuts and bolts before, Ted commented, bewildered. Usually he just wants the profit reports. For the rest of the week, Marcus felt Richard's presence like a shadow. The CEO appeared in doorways where Marcus was replacing fixtures, asked detailed questions about cleaning supplies, and once even followed him into the boiler room, watching silently as Marcus checked pressure gauges. On Friday afternoon, as Marcus was finishing his shift, Richard appeared at his office door. Johnson, my office, please. Here it comes, Marcus thought, the other shoe dropping. Perhaps Richard had decided having his former accountant working as a janitor was too uncomfortable. Perhaps he'd invented a reason to fire him again. When they reached the executive floor, Richard gestured for Marcus to sit, a courtesy he hadn't extended during their last significant conversation. I've been observing you this week, Richard began, seating himself not behind his desk, but in the chair adjacent to Marcus. Your work is exemplary. Your team respects you. You've implemented 3 cost-saving measures that Ted hadn't considered in 5 years. Thank you, Marcus replied cautiously. I've also been thinking about our last conversation at Westfield Financial. Richard looked uncomfortable now, his usual confidence wavering. About image and company culture. Marcus waited, unsure where this was heading. I've come to a decision, Richard continued. I'd like to offer you a position. A position? Marcus echoed, his hands unconsciously tightening on the armrests of his chair. After everything that happened, Richard's words seemed surreal, a cruel joke perhaps, or another humiliation waiting to unfold. Richard nodded, his typical boardroom confidence now tempered with something unfamiliar, hesitation, perhaps even humility. Not in maintenance. Back at Westfield Financial, the fluorescent lights hummed in the silence between them as Marcus processed the offer. Outside the window, the city stretched beneath them, a landscape of glass towers housing countless stories of power, struggle, and the invisible hierarchies that shaped human dignity. Why? Marcus finally asked, the single word carrying the weight of his month-long journey from executive to janitor, from security to precarity, and back toward an uncertain offer of restoration. Richard stood and walked a window, his reflection overlaying the cityscape beyond. For a moment, he seemed to be seeing something beyond the neighboring skyscrapers. My father built Westfield Financial from nothing, he began, his voice quieter than Marcus had ever heard it. He grew up poor, actually poor, not just financially challenged, as we say in our PR materials. Richard turned back to face Marcus. He never let me forget where we came from. Until I did forget. Marcus remained silent, allowing Richard the space to continue this unexpected confession. When I saw you yesterday, a man I knew to be brilliant with numbers directing a cleanup crew with the same dedication you once showed analyzing market trends, it reminded me of something my father used to say. The measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they do with what they're given. Richard returned to his seat across from Marcus. You've done more with what life handed you than I could have imagined. Meanwhile, I've become exactly what my father warned me against, someone who confuses wealth with worth. The revelation hung between them, transforming the dynamic that had defined their relationship for years. Marcus felt the strange sensation of seeing Richard not as a boss or antagonist, but simply as another human grappling with his own failings. I appreciate the reflection, Marcus said carefully, but I'm still not clear on what position you're offering or why. Richard leaned forward. Nathan, your replacement, has been a disaster. The Anderson portfolio is down 12%. 3 major clients have threatened to leave. The team is demoralized. He spread his hands. I need you back, not just for your financial expertise, but for something I didn't value before, your character. Marcus absorbed this information, feeling neither triumph nor resentment, but a complex mix of validation and wariness. And what would be different this time? My car is still the same. My suits haven't magically improved. The difference would be in me, Richard answered, surprising Marcus with his directness. And in the company culture. Your firing exposed something ugly in our values. In my values. I want to fix that, starting with bringing you back. As what? Senior Financial Director. Overseeing all portfolio management. Salary increase of 30% from your previous position, plus performance bonuses. The offer was everything Marcus had hoped for during his desperate weeks of job searching, and more. Yet something held him back from immediate acceptance. I've learned something valuable this past month, Marcus said, looking down at his maintenance uniform with its water stains and cleaning solution splatters. The people I've worked with here, Jorge, Elena, Darius, they've shown me more respect in 4 weeks than I sometimes felt in 5 years at Westfield. Not because of my title or education, but because I treated them with dignity, and they returned it. Richard nodded slowly. I understand. I don't think you do, Marcus continued, finding strength in articulating the insights that had reshaped his worldview. These people keep your buildings running, your offices clean, your systems working. Yet they're invisible to executives like us. Like I used to be, they struggle to pay rent while cleaning the offices where million-dollar decisions are made. Marcus leaned forward, meeting Richard's eyes directly. If I come back to Westfield Financial, I want to bring these lessons with me. I want to implement a living wage program for all support staff, create a tuition assistance fund for employees' children, establish financial literacy workshops open to everyone from custodians to CFOs. Richard's expression shifted from surprise to thoughtful consideration. Those are significant changes. They're necessary ones, Marcus replied. Not just morally, but practically. A company that values all its people, not just those in expensive suits. Builds loyalty you can't buy with year-end bonuses. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable but contemplative as Richard weighed Marcus's conditions. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city, highlighting both the gleaming penthouses and the humble neighborhoods beyond. The complete ecosystem of humanity that made the metropolitan machine function. "You know," Richard finally said, "my father would have liked you." He extended his hand. "You have a deal. Senior Financial Director Johnson. Draft the proposal for these initiatives, and I'll support them." As they shook hands, Marcus felt the weight of the past month transforming into something unexpected. Not just personal redemption, but the potential for systemic change, however small. "One more thing," Marcus added. "I want Jorge as my executive assistant." Richard's eyebrows shot up. "The maintenance worker? Does he have any office experience?" "He managed a business in his home country before coming here. His degree isn't recognized in the U.S. He's organized, multilingual, and understands both worlds in a way that will be invaluable as we implement these changes." Richard hesitated, then nodded. "Your team, your choice." 3 months later, Marcus sat in his new corner office, reviewing quarterly reports that showed not just financial growth, but improvements in employee retention and satisfaction. On his desk stood a framed photo of his family, now free from the shadow of financial insecurity, alongside a simple maintenance wrench Jorge had given him as a reminder of their shared journey. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Richard entered, followed by a young woman in a worn but carefully pressed suit. The new intern from their pilot program, recruiting from community colleges in underserved neighborhoods. "Marcus, this is Sofia Rodriguez, top of her class in accounting." Richard's introduction carried genuine respect. "Sophia, meet Marcus Johnson, the man who taught me that the strength of our company isn't measured by the cars in our parking lot, but by the character of the people inside our building." As Marcus stood to welcome Sophia, he caught sight of his reflection in the window. Still the same person who had parked his old Toyota at the far end of the lot months ago, but standing taller, his value no longer defined by external markers, but by the change he was helping create. "Welcome to Westfield Financial, Sophia," Marcus said warmly, seeing in her nervous determination echoes of his own journey. "We have a different kind of culture here than you might expect. Let me tell you how it evolved." And as he began sharing the story with this young woman starting her own professional path, Marcus realized that the greatest redemption wasn't his restored title or salary, but the opportunity to transform a system that had once humiliated him into one that recognized the inherent dignity of all who contributed to its success. Outside his window, in the executive parking lot, his old Toyota sat proudly in its designated space, no longer hidden at the far end, but displayed as a badge of authentic leadership, and a daily reminder to everyone at Westfield Financial that true worth transcends appearance, and that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from unexpected journeys. We all face moments when our worth is questioned based on superficial measures. Marcus's story reminds us that dignity isn't found in possessions, but in how we respond to adversity and how we treat others along the way. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need encouragement during their own challenging transition. Remember, sometimes the path to our greatest impact requires us to experience both sides of power, to understand what it means to serve before we can truly lead. What workplace transformation have you witnessed or helped create? The conversation starts with stories like these, but continues with actions like yours.